Last of Us Talk Show. I'm your host, Mikey, and today we are doing our Season 1, Episode 8 When We Are in Need video game versus episode comparison. Okay, so I just want to remind everybody that, uh, we're coming up on the last episode of the TV series. I'm recording this on Saturday, so at the time of this recording, tomorrow is the last episode of the season. But that does not mean that this podcast is going to end. We will keep things going. We're going to have a lot of episodes where we just have discussion, theories, um, all sorts of topics. Trying to hold us over until the next season releases. So make sure that you subscribe and follow so you can continue to be part of the conversation. Uh, with that being said, let's get into this here. This is the episode versus video game comparison. This episode, again, was starring Pedro Pascal, Bella Ramsey, Scott Shepard as David. Troy Baker was in here as James, and it was directed by Ali Abbasi. So now, in the game, remember when Joel and Ellie were, they had just been attacked by the Raiders outside of the college that they were going to. Okay, in the TV show, David or Joel, got stabbed with the bat, and then they got away, and then Joel passes out. In the game, Joel, fell off of a second floor balcony, got impaled with a rebar. Same thing though, they get away, and then eventually Joel passes out. Well, uh, in the video game, as we talked about in last week's episode, the Left Behind DLC and the Left Behind episode, that didn't come until after the game released. That was something that was added in later. So in the game, we jump straight to where we were in this episode. So there is no flashback to Ellie and Riley here. It just jumps straight to this. But in the video game, we do not see David. It doesn't open up with David like preaching to his flock. In the video game, it just opens up with Ellie by herself hunting with a bow and arrow. First, you see her hunt this rabbit, and there's this funny meme that you can find out there. I can't think, I'm not sure the name of the streamer who did this, but there was this woman streamer who was playing this game, and you just get over that emotional moment where Joel passes out and it looks like he might be dying, and then it fades to black and it cuts back in. You know, you went from fall to now it's winter, so you're doing a time jump, and Ellie's by herself. You see this white rabbit jumping around, and she's like, "Oh, it's so beautiful," and then boom, gets an arrow like right through the neck, and then she starts crying. It's pretty hilarious. If you have the time, go out and find that. But anyways, Ellie's here. She's hunting by herself. So in the game, you don't even know if Joel is alive for sure or not at this point. You open up and you're now playing as Ellie. This whole time in the game, you've been playing only as Joel. Ellie has been there and you have to protect her, but you never got to actually play as Ellie. This is the first time in the game that you play as Ellie, and it was also a big surprise to game players at the time because, the developers Neil Druckman and the rest of the Naughty Dog team were very secretive about this. And in fact, when asked if he would get to play as Joel and Ellie, if it was going to be, a game where you would switch them back and forth between two characters, they flat out lied and said, no, you're going to be playing as Joel. So it was like a big surprise to game players who had been anticipating the game that, oh no, Joel might be dead, and now I'm playing as Ellie. In the game, you you know, see her shoot this rabbit, and then you have to go through this little game where yes, you do have to sneak up on this deer and shoot it. And same thing happens. You shoot the deer with a bow and arrow. Again, by the way, you don't have a gun. You're just hunting with a bow and arrow. And um, yeah, you shoot it. It gets injured. It runs away, and then you have to track it, and you eventually do. And this is where you meet David and James. And they have the same conversation where they agree to trade for antibiotics, and James is going to go back to get it, and David is going to wait here with Ellie. Now, here's one thing that I do kind of wish they didn't leave out in the episode. It wasn't totally necessary, but 5 more minutes of the episode, this I know, like could have made us start to trust David a little more even in the episode, because in the game, while you're waiting for James to come back, you are attacked by infected, and then Ellie and David actually have to work together to fight off this like wave of infected that are attacking you while you're waiting for James to come back. You're in that little shack with the fireplace. Well, there's like a sawmill nearby, so they end up going through there to try to take cover, and then they get attacked by waves and waves of infected. Um, and then after fighting off the infected, you return to the campfire. But because you went through this little scenario, it makes you start to trust David a little bit more, because not only did it turn out that he had another gun on him that he could have used the whole time, but when the time came, instead of using it on you, he helped you fight off these infected, right? So it makes you trust him a little bit more. And in the TV show, they didn't even have to do like this. It's not a video game. It didn't have to be like dozens and dozens of infected that attack them. It could have just been like, again, maybe a couple of runners that are out in the middle of the forest for some reason, that come up on them and start to attack them, and they kill them. So it could have been like 2 or 3 runners or something, and it would have just given you that little bit of like a little bit more trust in David, that or a little bit more faith in David, that you could be trusting of him. It would have been nice to see that. We didn't get that here, but in the video game, you go through this huge wave of infected. You then eventually return to the campfire, and this is where David gives you the same speech of how he believes that everything happens for a reason, and then reveals that he knows who Ellie is, but based on Joel killing a bunch of men previously, and how he was traveling with a little girl and that Joel should be injured. Same thing. James arrives, gives Ellie the medicine because David tells him to. Ellie grabs it, and then she runs off and returns to Joel. Again, in the video game, David, I will say that in the TV show, actually, that David comes off even creepier because of the whole cult element that they gave to him, the cult leader element. He doesn't really have that in the video game. In the video game, he's just like the leader of this town, but there's no, we don't get that much backstory on David. Like, we don't know for sure that he's like the cult leader of this group. And in fact, when things get messy later, you start to hear some of the men that are chasing after Ellie and Joel, question David and say how they're gonna, get rid of him and get a new leader. That doesn't seem like that is, as much of an option for the people in the TV show because David has such a stranglehold over them, you know. But again, in the game, um, Ellie, uh, she gets the medicine to Joel, gives it to him. Uh, she sleeps, and then when she wakes up in the morning, she sees that David and his men have tracked her to the neighborhood that her and Joel are in. So same thing. She goes out on her horse to draw the men away from the house that Joel is in. You lead them away, and um, you fight a bunch of men. Ellie's got to, you know, sneakily, uh, like assassinate a bunch of these men uh, and kill them. Just using uh, arrows to be sneaky. You can shoot guns with Ellie at this point. Um, but it's again, it's not very grounded. It's a video game, so you're going through this huge um, obstacle of like trying to find your way through this neighborhood and avoid these men. So you pretty much kill everybody that is coming after you except for David. Um, you start seeking through this house, and then eventually, you one of the houses that you exit or buildings that you exit, you go out the door. Uh, David sneaks up on you, catches you, and chokes Ellie out. And then we cut to her locked in the cage, and um, again, um, very similar conversation, not exactly the same, but David is telling Ellie how he's gonna convince the others that Ellie is special and that she can be with him and be one of the leaders, basically. Um, and same thing, David puts his hand on Ellie's hand, and Ellie's like, "Oh," and then takes her other hand, puts it on top of his, and then breaks his finger. And David says he's gonna come back and chop her up into tiny pieces. And in the game, we actually cut back to Joel here, and you are controlling Joel once again, and it's a lot more, uh, you know, as a game gives the player more things to do. You have to actually go outside the house, and you have to like fight David's men outside. You pretty much again kill them all except for the last two, who jump you, and then you fight them off and you knock them out. Just like it's not like the smart, sneaky way that Joel did it in the TV show. They kind of get the jump on you, and you just are able to uh, use your strength against them. Um, and then we get this map scene, and that's like exactly the way it happened in the TV show. That's the way it happens exactly in the game. Uh, so that was awesome to see. Nothing really to compare here because it was exactly the same and brutal, just like you would expect. um, and then we cut back to David and James. They are about to chop Ellie up, and Ellie using her smarts, just like in the TV show. She does say that she's infected. They check. Same thing. Uh, David is skeptical. James believes it's real. Ellie grabs the butcher knife, plants it in James, and then takes off running. Um, in the game, Ellie actually runs outside here into the town, and here a bunch of David's men are helping to hunt Ellie down. So it's not the same where in the TV show it seemed like okay, only a couple people know about Ellie being locked in here, and um, in the TV show it's like James and David know Ellie is in there. They're gonna chop her up, and then she gets away, and then she's locked inside of the steakhouse with him already. In the game, you run outside. Uh, a bunch of the men know you're there, You got to kill all these men, only to, again, you're trying to figure your way out of this town. So you have to end up going through the steakhouse. And then when you get into the steakhouse, that's where David corners Ellie and gets her trapped in there. And this is like the hardest part of the video game. Like, so many people die dozens and dozens of times trying to get this part done. I think that's why sometimes people who are game players watch the show and they think to themselves, well, how are they going to fit that section of the game into a 45-minute episode? Because they're thinking it took them 2 or 3 hours to finish a piece of or a section of that game. When you look at the story that happened in the game and take out all the time you spent, searching for supplies, take out all the time that you spent dying and having to redo it again, it probably really is only 45 minutes worth of like story being told in that time. There's just a lot of walking around and collecting things in the game that you're not going to see in a TV show. Um, but yeah, anyways, you fight your way through the town, and this blizzard is happening, so the blizzard's getting stronger, makes it harder to see. But you make your way to the steakhouse. David ambushes you in there, and you're stuck in there with him. You end up like having to sneak all around the steakhouse, trying to avoid him, because in the game he just like anytime he catches you, you're dead. You're dead in one hit. So it makes it, like I said, really hard. Um, so as you're sneaking around with Ellie, you are like slashing him with your knife and then running and hiding again. And you have to do this a few times. And each time you hit him with your knife, he gets a little bit crazier and then more frantic and runs and looks around faster, and it gets harder and harder to avoid him. And then we cut to Joel outside. He's now at the town. So you go back to controlling Joel, and you're thinking, oh, okay, I'm Joel again. I'm going to um, fight through the town, and I'm going to have to save Ellie because obviously she's in a bad situation. I just spent the last 2 hours dying again and again trying to defeat David. But again, like I said in the game, after you slash him a few times, that's like the trigger that it cuts you back to Joel. So then now you're in the town, making your way to Ellie, again, killing a bunch of people on your way there. Same thing, he comes across the dead bodies that are strung up outside, that are strung up, getting ready to be prepared for food. And then he goes outside and he sees that the steakhouse is on fire, so he goes towards the steakhouse. Um, like I said, Ellie had slashed David a bunch of times with this knife. David uh, kind of catches her, but they fight and they both kind of get knocked out. Ellie wakes up first and she starts crawling towards, instead of a butcher knife, it was like a machete that David was carrying. So Ellie starts like crawling her way towards the machete. And then same thing, David stops her, gets on top of her, but thankfully Ellie crawled close enough to this machete that was underneath the table. She crawled close enough to it that once David gets on top of her, she's still able to reach it. Boom, hits David with it. He falls off of her. She gets on top of him and she starts hacking away on David, just like in the TV show. Now, the difference here in the game, Joel enters the steakhouse. So instead of Ellie like finishing this up, being by herself, and then going out solo and Joel finding her in the game, she's in the middle of hacking away when Joel grabs her, tells her to stop, that it's okay, it's done, and then he still says the famous line, "Oh baby girl, it's okay, it's me," type of thing. But he stops her in the middle of it. And then we see them walk out of the burning steakhouse, and it fades out to black. So that's how it happened in the game. Uh, I actually prefer the TV show, that Ellie was there by herself, and then Joel meets her outside. I feel like it just gives that much more powerful of a moment where it felt like, oh, Ellie really was by herself, her worst fear, um, and she still at that point doesn't know, is she going to be by herself, uh, and because of the horrible thing that multiple horrible things that David just tried to do to her. Whether it was assault her or, um, you know, attempt to turn her into food. Um, we see, like she could be losing her humanity and her sanity, but Joel shows up to save her. Whereas in the game, um, you don't see that look on her face, uh, like you do with Bella Ramsey when she exits the steakhouse. You can really tell, like, she, because of everything that just happened, she could potentially be really losing touch with her humanity. Um, so I like in the video game that, I mean, I like in the TV show that we got to see that, uh, and in the video game, you kind of stop her in the middle of it. Either way, I think it's still, um, achieves the same thing, but I feel like it's just a little bit stronger in the TV show. But let me know what you think. How did you like, especially if you're a game player, how did you like this episode compared to the game? I thought it was fantastic. I thought they really, gave us some good background on David and the rest of the group. Following him made him even creepier than he already was in the video game. So, overall, I thought it was great. Uh, that's going to be the episode. But again, make sure you subscribe, make sure you follow, because the show is not going to end when the season ends. This show, anyways, this podcast is not going to end. So, make sure you keep leaving those comments, give the feedback. I would love to keep you interacting with you guys. That's what's going to make this show even, more fun as we go along, because it could potentially be a pretty long wait before the next season starts. But there's still a lot of fun things to talk about, and I want you guys to be involved in that. So make sure you subscribe, hit the follow button, leave reviews would be great. Comments on the YouTube channel, that would all be awesome. So we can keep this community going for the next 1 to 2 years, however long it takes to get the next season. But yeah, until next time, endure and survive.